The doctor looked at me across her desk and asked a question I wasn't prepared for. Not because it was complicated, because it was simple. "Mr. Parker," she said, "why are you still paying for treatment?" I sat across from her in that clean, well-lit office, and I heard the question, and I understood each individual word. And for a moment, I could not make them form a coherent sentence. "The treatment," I said, "for his condition, the maintenance protocol." She looked at me with the particular expression of someone recalibrating, a medical professional encountering a gap between what a patient believes and what the records actually say. "Noah has been in stable remission for 3 years," she said carefully. "His last specialist review confirmed full recovery of function. There is no active treatment protocol for your son." 3 years. I sat in that chair and did the math. 3 years of maintenance payments. 3 years of my parents telling me the doctors needed more. 3 years of contracts extended, trips home canceled, birthdays missed over the phone. 3 years. Noah was 13 years old. The last time I had been home for longer than 2 weeks was when he was 9. I had missed the back half of his entire childhood, believing I was saving his life. I asked the doctor if I could use her phone. She said, of course. I sat there for a moment with the receiver in my hand. Then I put it back down. There were some conversations that needed to happen in person. I need to go back about 6 years, to before the overseas contracts and the wire transfers and the medical invoices I never thought to verify. Because why would you verify a medical invoice for your sick child? To before the hospital visits I attended over video call because I was 4 time zones away and couldn't get the time off. To when I was 35, sitting in a divorce mediator's office, signing papers that formalized the end of my marriage to a woman I had once loved very much and had failed to hold on to. Sandra and I had been together for 8 years. The first 4 were good. The second 4 were the story of 2 people who had grown into incompatible shapes and were spending most of their energy pretending otherwise. The affair was hers. I won't spend time on that. It's not the point of this story. And when it surfaced, the marriage ended with the particular efficiency of something that had been structurally compromised for years and was simply waiting for the right pressure. We had Noah. That was the only thing that mattered after the papers were signed. The custody case took 7 months. I won primary custody, which surprised some people who knew us, because Sandra was by most measures the warmer parent, more patient, more naturally playful, better at the spontaneous things that children remember. What I had was consistency and financial stability and a lawyer who was better than hers. And in the arithmetic of family court, that was enough. Noah was 7 when he came to live with me. He was a quiet kid, not withdrawn. He had friends, had opinions, had a specific and inflexible sense of what he found funny, but interior in the way that some children are, spending a lot of time in his own head. He liked to build things. He could spend an entire Saturday afternoon constructing something out of cardboard and tape, and whatever else was in the recycling bin, and present it to me at dinner with the serious pride of an architect unveiling a major project. I loved him in the helpless, total way that you love your children, without strategy, without reservation, with the kind of intensity that occasionally frightened me with its implications. He was my entire point. He got sick 8 months after the divorce was finalized. Juvenile idiopathic arthritis. A diagnosis that arrived after 3 months of watching him wake up in the morning moving like an old man, joints swollen and stiff, the easy physical confidence of childhood replaced by a careful, pained deliberateness that broke my heart every time I watched it. It was manageable, the first rheumatologist said, with the right treatment protocol, with regular monitoring. There were medications that helped significantly, biologics, newer drugs with substantial research behind them, but they were expensive, and they required specialist oversight, and the specialist he recommended was 2 hours away. The medications worked. Within 4 months, Noah was moving better, sleeping better, returning gradually to himself. The relief of watching it happen, the simple physical joy of seeing your child get up from a chair without wincing, is not something I can adequately describe. But the costs were real. My salary as a project manager at a mid-size construction firm was comfortable but not elastic. The medications, the specialist visits, the insurance gaps, it added up in ways that required consistent math. I started doing the kind of financial calculus that you only do when the stakes are high enough. What can be cut? What can be deferred? What is non-negotiable? Noah was non-negotiable. Everything else was adjustable. My parents called in the middle of this. They lived 40 minutes from my apartment, close enough to be present and far enough that I'd never felt crowded by them. My father, Dennis, had been a machinist for 30 years and carried himself with the straightforward practicality of a man who had spent his life solving concrete problems. My mother, Carol, was warmer, more expressive, the emotional center of the family in the way that certain mothers are without making it a performance. They came for dinner one evening about a year after Noah's diagnosis, when his condition had stabilized but the financial pressure hadn't, and my mother made chicken and my father asked about work, and Noah showed them the cardboard model he'd been building all week, a version of a bridge he'd seen in a book. After Noah went to bed, they sat with me at the kitchen table. My father put his hands flat on the table the way he did when he was about to say something he'd thought about. "We want to help," he said. I started to say something about it being fine, that we were managing the standard deflections. "Not with money," my mother said. "Well, a little, but mainly with him, with Noah." She looked at me steadily. "You're stretched too thin, Ethan. We can see it. And there's an opportunity coming up that we think you should take." The opportunity was a 2-year contract overseas, a large infrastructure project in the Gulf that a colleague had mentioned to my father. The salary was nearly double what I was making. The package included accommodation, 2 years of that income, carefully managed, and Noah's treatment costs for the foreseeable future were covered with room to spare. "We'll look after him," my father said. "We're his grandparents. This is what family does." I sat with it for 2 weeks. I talked to Noah. He was 8 years old and he listened with the seriousness he brought to important things, and he said, "If you go, will you video call every week?" "Every week," I said. "Okay," he said, "if it helps pay for my medicine." That sentence, I have thought about that sentence 10,000 times since then. The way he said it, so matter of fact, so willing to absorb the cost of something he hadn't asked for, so ready to go without his father because he understood, at 8 years old, that his father was going without him for a reason. I signed the contract. I told myself it was 2 years. The 2 years became 3. 3 became 4. 4 stretched to 5. The extension requests came with reasons that always made sense in isolation. The project scope expanded. A new contract was available that I was uniquely positioned for. My parents needed just a bit more time with Noah's treatment, a new phase of medication, a specialist recommending a longer monitoring period, an unexpected complication that was under control but required continued oversight. Always just a bit more time. Always for good reasons. I sent money home every month, a fixed amount that covered Noah's expenses, plus a supplement that went into a household account my parents managed. I received monthly updates, Noah's health, his school performance, occasional photographs and short video clips that I watched alone in my apartment overseas, usually late at night. He was growing. Every photograph, he was taller, older, more himself. There was a picture from his 10th birthday, cake, balloons, my parents on either side of him, where he was smiling, but his eyes were doing something complicated that I filed under natural childhood adjustment and tried not to look at too carefully. I video called every Sunday. It became the fixed point of my week. We talked about school, about the things he was building, about a book series he'd become obsessed with. He never complained. He asked when I was coming home with the regularity of a question that expects the same answer, which I always gave him. Soon, when the treatment is sorted, when things are stable. My brother Ryan was around. I should say more about Ryan. Ryan was 35, 6 years younger than me, and had the particular quality of someone for whom things had always somehow worked out without him doing much to make them work. He'd had 3 careers in 10 years, none of which had taken hold. He drove a car that seemed nicer than his income warranted. He went on holidays that I didn't know how he afforded. When I asked casually, not wanting to make an issue of it, he always had an answer that was just specific enough to sound plausible. A good run at a thing, an investment that paid off, a friend with a spare place. I noted it the way you note something that seems slightly off, but has a reasonable enough explanation that you don't push further. I had a sick child. I was 4 time zones away. I had no energy left over for suspicion. And then one year, Noah turned 11. I called on his birthday. He picked up on the second ring. "Happy birthday, buddy," I said. There was a pause, brief but there. "Thanks, Dad," he said, something in his voice. Not anger, not quite, more like the particular flatness of a child who is managing his expectations. "I'll be home soon," I said. "The treatment." "I know," he said. "Mom told me." Sandra had taken to calling him on his birthdays. They'd settled into something workable after the divorce, and I was grateful for it. But hearing him mention her name in that moment, the tone of it, like someone else was doing the thing I was supposed to be doing, sat in me uneasily. We talked for 40 minutes. He told me about a project at school, and a friend named Cooper, and a television show he thought I should watch. I told him I loved him. "I know," he said. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time. Then my mother messaged. The specialist, she said, had recommended extending the current protocol by another 6 months. There was a new phase of treatment that had shown promising results. The costs would be slightly higher, but they thought it was the right call. I wrote back that it was fine. I authorized the additional transfer, because what else do you do when your son is sick, and the doctors say he needs more? You find more. You always find more. That's what fathers do. The years have a way of compressing in memory. What felt endless while living inside it, the waiting, the distance, the Sunday calls and the wire transfers and the monthly medical updates, collapses afterward into something that feels both very long and impossibly short. 5 years. My son grew from 8 to 13 inside those 5 years, and I watched it happen the way you watch a time lapse. In jumps, in increments, always slightly behind the reality. Let me tell you what I missed. Not as a list. Lists are too clean for this. Let me tell you the specific things, because specificity is the only honest way to account for time. I missed his 9th birthday because the project timeline shifted, and the flights home were too expensive to justify for a 4-day window. My parents threw him a party. My mother sent photographs. Noah in a paper crown, surrounded by kids from school whose names I didn't know yet. In one photo, he was mid-laugh, head thrown back, completely unself-conscious. I looked at that photograph for a long time. I saved it to my phone. I still have it. I missed his first day of middle school because the contract had a critical phase that month and taking time off wasn't possible. My mother described it in a text message. He'd been nervous, she said, but he settled in quickly. Made a friend named Cooper on the first day, found his locker on the second try. I called that evening. Noah told me about his math teacher, who apparently had a habit of making the same joke every time someone got a question right. He did an impression of it. I laughed, he laughed. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen overseas and thought about how I didn't know what he looked like walking through a school hallway. Whether he walked fast or slow. Whether he talked to people or kept to himself. The ordinary physical texture of his daily life had become invisible to me. I knew the highlights. I didn't know the in-between. The in-between is most of a life. I missed the school play he was in when he was 10. He had a small part, 3 lines, my mother said, but he'd rehearsed for weeks. We watched it together over video call, me propped up at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning because of the time difference, the audio slightly delayed, the image pixelating at moments. He found me in the audience afterward, found the screen his grandmother was holding up, and waved with both hands the way small kids wave, big and unself-conscious. I waved back at a screen in an empty kitchen. I missed his first school basketball game. I missed the weekend he and Cooper built a go-kart in the backyard that didn't quite work, but almost did, which he told me about in detail over 30 minutes one Sunday, drawing diagrams in the air with his hands. I missed the haircut he got at 11 that changed his face somehow, made him look like someone slightly older than the person I'd been picturing. I missed whatever it was that happened in the summer between 6th and 7th grade that made him quieter, more internal, more careful with what he showed people. I don't know what that was. I still don't know. He never told me, and I didn't know how to ask over a video call with 1,100 miles between us. Ryan bought a new car when Noah was 10. German make. I don't know much about cars, but I knew enough to know it wasn't cheap. He mentioned it casually in a conversation about something else. The way you mention things you want noticed, but don't want to appear to be showing off. Business going well, I said. Not bad, he said. Few things have come together. What things? Just, investments. I've been smarter about it lately. I let it go. 6 months later, my mother mentioned, in passing, that Ryan had taken a holiday. Portugal, she said. 2 weeks. He'd gone with some friends. Portugal. I was working 12-hour days on a construction site in 40-degree heat. sending money home every month, and my brother was holidaying in Portugal. I sat with that. I told myself I was being uncharitable. Ryan's finances were Ryan's business. If he had found a way to stabilize things, that was good. That was what I wanted for him. I sent the monthly transfer. I did not ask any more questions about Portugal. The calls with my parents followed a pattern I recognized without fully examining. My father would give me the practical update. Noah's health, the household, any issues that needed addressing. He was efficient, factual, the same way he'd always been. At the end, he would say something like, "You're doing good, Ethan. This is hard and you're doing it right." My mother would get emotional. Not manipulatively, or at least not in a way I ever identified as manipulation. She cried sometimes when she talked about Noah, about how much he missed me, about how he sometimes asked questions she didn't know how to answer. She always ended by saying that she knew how much I was sacrificing and that it wasn't going unnoticed. "He knows you're doing this for him," she said once. "He understands." I held on to that. In the absence of actually being there, I held on to the idea that he understood, that the sacrifice was legible to him, that he could see the shape of what I was doing even if I wasn't physically present to show him. What I didn't consider, what I could not afford to consider at the time, was that there's a difference between a child understanding something intellectually and a child feeling it emotionally. Noah understood why I was away. He had been told, repeatedly, carefully, by adults he trusted. That didn't mean he didn't feel the absence as abandonment. Those are two different things. I know that now. The call that changed something in me happened when Noah was 12. It was a Sunday in March, his usual call time. He picked up on the fourth ring instead of the second, which I noted. He looked different on screen. Not dramatically, just the small daily changes that accumulate until you realize the face you've been picturing no longer matches the one in front of you. He'd grown, of course, but it was something else, a quality of containment, like he'd learned to take up slightly less space. We talked about school. He gave me information the way you give a report, complete, accurate, without much texture. "How's Cooper?" I asked. "Good. You guys still working on anything?" "Not really." A pause. "We've kind of been doing different things lately." Yeah. Silence. I asked about a book series he'd mentioned the month before. "I finished it," he said. "It was good." "What happened at the end?" He told me, briefly. The way you describe something to someone who wasn't there and won't fully get it, but you tell them anyway because they asked. Near the end of the call, we'd been talking for about 20 minutes, which was shorter than usual. He asked the question he always asked. "When are you coming home?" "Soon," I said. "The contract's almost finished. There's just one more phase and then." "Okay," he said. Not disappointed, not angry, just settled, like a person who has adjusted their expectations to a level that can't be let down anymore. That word sat in me for days. Okay. He was 12 years old, and he had learned to say okay the way adults say okay, when they mean something else entirely. I finished the final project phase in October. The contract was complete. The extension I'd agreed to 8 months earlier. Another treatment phase, my mother had said, the specialist wanted to monitor the response to the new protocol, was finished. The final payments made, and I was boarding a flight home for the first time in 14 months. 14 months. Noah would have been 13 for 6 weeks by the time I landed. I sat in the window seat and watched the ground fall away and thought about what I was going home to, not with dread, with a kind of hunger that I had been keeping managed for so long that letting it be fully felt was almost uncomfortable. I was going home. I was going to be in the same room as my son. I was going to make breakfast and watch television and argue about bedtime and do the ordinary things that I had been conducting at a distance for 5 years. The flight was 11 hours. I slept for maybe 2. My parents' house looked the same from the outside. The garden was slightly overgrown on the left side, which my father would have opinions about. The same car in the driveway. The same weather vane above the garage that had been slightly tilted for as long as I could remember. I had barely gotten out of the taxi when the front door opened. My mother came out first, then my father. The usual reunion, my mother hugging me too tight, my father's handshake that became a brief grip on my shoulder, the familiar smell of the house when I stepped inside. Then Noah appeared at the top of the stairs. Tall, he was tall now, I knew this intellectually, had watched it happen on screen, but standing at the bottom of a staircase looking up at him, the reality of it was different from the knowledge. He was nearly eye level with me. His face had sharpened, the softness of early childhood mostly gone. He came down the stairs, and I noticed, registered without immediately processing, the way he moved. Easy, loose. The natural physical ease of a healthy 13-year-old, taking the stairs 2 at a time, landing at the bottom with a small jump. No stiffness, no careful negotiation of his joints, no wince. He crossed the hallway and hugged me, and I held him, and I was so focused on the feeling of it, the reality of my son in the same physical space after 14 months, that I pushed the other thing aside. But I had seen it. The ease. Later, after dinner, after the conversation and the unpacking and the first ordinary evening in 5 years, I lay in the guest room bed and thought about the way he'd come down those stairs. Not limping, not careful, not like a child managing a chronic condition, like a child who had simply never needed to manage one. I told myself I was reading into it, that medication worked, that the treatment had done its job, that healthy was what we had been paying for and healthy was what we had. I told myself this for 3 days. Then I made an appointment with Noah's specialist. Or rather, I tried to. The clinic had no record of the specialist my parents had been referencing for 2 years. The doctor who had overseen Noah's original treatment had retired. The new physician who had taken over his caseload looked at Noah's file and said he'd be happy to do a full review. I sat across from her in that clean, well-lit office. She looked at me carefully. "Mr. Parker," she said, "why are you still paying for treatment?" And the world rearranged itself around that question. I am, by profession, an engineer. I build things. I read specifications. I identify structural problems before they become structural failures. I have spent 20 years learning to look at systems with the kind of patience that does not assume and does not panic, that follows the evidence where it leads and trusts the math over the instinct. I applied that training to my own family. It took me 4 days. The first thing I did was pull every medical invoice I had ever received. I had kept them. I keep everything, another professional habit, documentation as a form of security, and they were stored in a folder on my laptop that I hadn't opened in years because there had been no reason to open it. Paying them had been an act of faith, not analysis. You don't audit receipts when the reason for them is your child's health. But now I sat at the kitchen table in my parents' house. They had gone to bed. Noah was asleep upstairs, the house making its quiet nighttime sounds, and I went through them. 41 invoices over 5 years, totaling, when I added them up, a number that sat in my chest like something physical. The first year's invoices were consistent with what Noah's original physician had quoted me. Medications, monitoring visits, specialist consultations. The amounts made sense. The provider names matched the practice I had authorized at the beginning. The second year was where things began to drift. New provider names appeared. A clinic I didn't recognize, listed only by an abbreviation. A specialist whose name I had never been given verbally. He appeared first in month 14 as Dr. F. Marsh, consulting without further detail. The amounts climbed. Not dramatically, not in a way that would have triggered alarm in isolation, but steadily, month by month, in the way that gradual changes are designed to be absorbed rather than noticed. By year 3, more than half the invoices were from providers I had never been told about. I spent an evening running searches. The clinic abbreviation resolved to a business that had closed 2 years ago. The address was a commercial unit in an industrial park 30 minutes from my parents' house. Dr. F. Marsh did not appear in any medical registry I could find. I sat with that for a while. Then I opened my bank records. The household account had been set up at the beginning of the arrangement. I transferred a fixed monthly sum enough for Noah's expenses plus a reasonable household contribution, and my parents managed the day-to-day. I had full access to the account but had never used it. There had been no reason to. I looked at 5 years of transactions in one sitting. The withdrawals for anything that looked like medical payments totaled roughly 40% of what I had been invoiced. The remaining 60% had moved, in transfers of varying sizes, to an account I didn't recognize. I wrote down the account number. I called my bank the next morning. The account belonged to Ryan. I didn't go to my parents immediately. I took another day. Not because I needed more evidence. The evidence was complete, the picture was clear. But because I needed to be certain of myself before I walked into that room. I needed to have run the full calculation, checked every assumption, verified every number. Because I knew that when I sat across from my parents and put this in front of them, the first thing they would do was find the error, point to the thing I'd missed, offer the explanation I hadn't considered. I wasn't going to give them that room. I contacted a financial investigator on the second day. A woman named Helen Chu, who had been recommended by a colleague years ago for work on a contract dispute. I explained what I had found. She said she could have a preliminary analysis within 48 hours. She was done in 30. The report confirmed what the bank records showed, an added texture I hadn't had. The transfers to Ryan's account had begun in month 4 of the arrangement, 3 months after I signed the first overseas contract. They had been consistent, increasing incrementally, never large enough in any single instance to draw obvious attention. Over 5 years, they represented approximately 63% of the total funds I had sent home. Helen had also flagged something else. Ryan's own financial records, accessible through filings connected to a business he'd registered and dissolved, showed a period of significant expenditure coinciding almost exactly with the beginning of the transfers. The car, 2 holidays, a deposit on an apartment, a series of payments to what appeared to be a private lending company, which Helen suggested was likely debt repayment. My brother had been in financial trouble. My parents had known, and they had found a solution. I asked them to sit down after dinner on a Thursday evening. Noah was at a friend's house. I had arranged that deliberately. Whatever happened in the next hour was not something he needed to be present for. My father sat at the head of the table, my mother beside him. They had the slightly careful quality of people who have been anticipating something without knowing exactly what form it would take. I put the bank statements on the table. I put Helen's report beside them. I didn't say anything for a moment. I let them look. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father looked at the documents with an expression I had never seen on him before. Not guilt, exactly, or not only guilt. Something more complex. The expression of a man looking at something he built and recognizing, for the first time with full clarity, what it actually is. How long, I said, did you know Noah was stable? Silence. The medical records show he reached full stability in month 19 of the arrangement, I said. His original physician documented it. The case was closed in his files. I paused. That was 3.5 years ago. I want to know when you knew. My mother said, Ethan, when did you know? My father's jaw worked. He looked at the table. Around the same time, he said, the doctor told us. And you told me he still needed treatment. He stopped. You told me he still needed treatment for 3.5 more years. We needed, my mother started. What did you need? The word sat in the room. My father put his hands flat on the table. The same gesture as always, the gesture that meant he was about to say something he'd prepared. But this time, what came out of him was not prepared. It came out the way things come out when the prepared version has finally run out of road. Ryan was in trouble, he said. Real trouble. He owed money to people who weren't. It wasn't a bank, Ethan. It was serious. We needed to get him clear, and we didn't have enough, and you were sending money every month, and Noah's treatment was ending, and we thought. You thought you'd keep sending the invoices. He didn't answer. You thought I wouldn't check. Still nothing. Because I never checked, I said. Because it was my son, who checks invoices when it's their son. My mother was crying now. Not dramatically. She wasn't that kind of woman. But quietly, steadily, the way people cry when they've been holding something for a very long time, and the effort has finally exceeded what they can sustain. It was supposed to be temporary, she said. A few months, until Ryan was stable. And then we were going to tell you Noah was better and you could come home and... But you didn't. It became, she stopped. It got larger. Every month it got larger, and telling you would have meant explaining everything, and we couldn't. You couldn't explain where the money went. She nodded, a small wrecked movement. I looked at my father. Did you know what Ryan was spending it on? A pause. Most of it, he said. The car. Yes. The holidays. Some of them. The apartment deposit. He nodded. I sat with that for a moment. The thing I had been circling, the thing that was worse than the lie itself. They had known. Not just that the money was going to Ryan, they had known what Ryan was doing with it. The car. the holidays, the lifestyle. They had watched their younger son spend money that was being extorted from their older son's fear for his child, and they had kept sending the invoices. "Why?" I said. "If you knew he was wasting it, why did you keep going?" My father looked at his hands. "Because stopping meant admitting it," he said quietly. "To you, to ourselves." A long pause. We've always known Ryan needed more help, more intervention, more management. And admitting that he was doing this with your money for your son, he stopped. "We couldn't. You couldn't admit he was a failure." The word landed hard. My father flinched slightly. "So you let him fail with my money instead?" Neither of them answered. I found Ryan the next day. He was at his apartment, the one with the deposit my money had partly funded. He opened the door and looked at me, and whatever he saw in my face made him step back slightly before he decided to. I went in. I sat down. I put Helen's report on his coffee table. He looked at it. He looked at me. Then he did something I had not fully anticipated. He didn't deny it. He sat down across from me, and he looked at the report, and he said nothing for a long time. "I was drowning," he said finally. "I know. They offered, I didn't," he stopped. "I told them it was too much the first time. I told them they shouldn't. But you took the money." He didn't answer. "You took it for 5 years, Ryan. I paid some of it back. There are transfers to the household account. I saw them. They total 11% of what you received." I paused. "Did that feel like paying it back?" He looked at the window. "I'm going to ask you to do something," I said. "I'm not asking for your agreement. I'm telling you what's going to happen." I let that sit for a moment. "You're going to provide a full accounting of every transfer you received. You're going to sign a document acknowledging the debt. And you're going to work with my lawyer to establish a repayment schedule." "Ethan, I don't have." "I didn't ask what you have." Silence. "And if you don't," I said, "I give everything I have to the police and we do this differently." He looked at me then, and I saw something I hadn't expected, not defiance, not the entitled anger I'd prepared for. Something smaller. Something that looked almost like relief. The relief of someone for whom the weight of a secret has finally been lifted, regardless of how. "Okay," he said, the same word Noah used. A completely different thing. That night I sat at my parents' kitchen table alone, after they had gone to bed, with Helen's full report open in front of me. I found the page with the total, the number that represented 5 years of overseas contracts, 12-hour days, missed birthdays, Sunday video calls, Noah saying *okay in the voice he'd learned when he stopped expecting things. I looked at it for a long time. Then I got out a piece of paper, and I did the math. Noah had turned 9 the year the arrangement began. He was 13 now. 4 birthdays. 5, if you counted the one coming in March. I divided the number, on Helen's report, by the birthdays. I sat with what that division produced. Nobody had ever asked me what a birthday was worth. I had never thought to put a number on it. Now I had one, and it sat in front of me on that kitchen table, precise and irrefutable and absolutely meaningless. Because there is no arithmetic for what was lost. There is only what remains, and what I did next with it. Ryan called me 6 weeks later, not to apologize, not to discuss the repayment schedule his lawyer and mine had been working through. He called at 11 on a Tuesday night, which told me the nature of the call before he said a word. "I need you to listen to me," he said. "I'm listening." "The investments," he stopped, started again. "There are some positions that didn't, the market's been," another stop. The sound of someone who has rehearsed something and is discovering the rehearsal didn't account for the reality. "I'm going to need some time on the repayment, more than we discussed." "How much time?" Silence. "Ryan, I don't know yet." "That's not an answer." "Ethan, I'm trying to be honest with you." "You've been trying to be honest with me for 6 weeks," I said. "The time for trying is finished. You have a signed agreement. You have a schedule. I need to know if you're going to meet it." Another silence, longer. "I don't think I can," he said. I had prepared myself for this. Helen had flagged it as likely. Ryan's financial position was more precarious than the initial accounting suggested, and the repayment schedule we'd agreed to assumed income he was already struggling to generate. She had recommended I treat the agreement as partial recovery at best. "Then we'll proceed as discussed," I said. "Ethan, please, if you go to the police." "I already spoke with them," I said. "A detective is reviewing the documentation. Whether they move forward isn't my decision anymore." He went quiet for a long time. I have nothing, he said, finally, quietly, without the performance of the earlier part of the call, just the flat statement of a man who has run out of road. I have nothing left. I thought about the car, the holidays, Portugal, the apartment deposit, 5 years of my money moving through my brother's hands and becoming things that no longer existed. I know, I said. I hung up. The debt collectors came to Ryan's apartment 3 weeks after that. I didn't arrange it. It was the natural consequence of obligations he'd been managing through my money for years. Now, without that money to manage them with, my mother called me when she found out, her voice doing the thing it did when she needed me to fix something, the specific frequency I had spent a decade and a half responding to. I let it ring. I let it ring 3 times that week. On the 4th call, I picked up. Your father and I are trying to help him, she said. But we don't have. We've been relying on the household account for so long that our own savings are. I know, I said. If you could just. No, I said. The word sat between us. She had called me for 15 years with requests of one kind or another, and I had said no. I need more time. Or let me see what I can do, or I'll transfer it by Friday. I had never simply said no and stopped. Ethan, Mom, I need to say something and I need you to hear it. I kept my voice level. Not cold, not angry. I had spent the last 6 weeks moving through the anger into something quieter on the other side of it. I'm not going to help Ryan, not because I don't love him, but because the help he's received hasn't helped him. It's funded him. And there's a difference. Silence. And I need you and Dad to understand that the household account is closed. Whatever comes next for you, that's something you're going to have to work out. I'll talk to you. I'll see you. But I won't be managing your finances anymore. We're your parents. I know. We made mistakes, Ethan, terrible mistakes. But we love you. We love Noah. We never wanted. I know you didn't want this, I said. I believe that. But wanting is not the same as choosing, and every month for 3.5 years you chose to keep going. I need you to sit with that. Not for me, just because it's true. She was crying. I stayed on the line, until she wasn't anymore. Then I said goodbye, and I meant it kindly, and I hung up. Ryan was arrested, on a Thursday morning in November. He had gone to my parents' house the week before, I heard this afterward, and taken a number of things. Electronics, mostly. Some jewelry of my mother's that had been her own mother's. He'd been hoping to sell them before the collectors arrived at his apartment. My father called the police. I don't know what that cost him. I have thought about it, and I genuinely don't know. Dennis Parker was a man who had spent his life believing he was protecting his children, even when protection had curdled into something unrecognizable. And calling the police on his younger son was a kind of reckoning I cannot fully imagine. He called me after. Not to ask for anything, just to tell me. He sounded old on the phone. Older than I had ever heard him, like something structural had given way. I'm sorry, he said. For all of it, I know that's not enough. No, I said, it isn't. Is there anything? Not right now, I said. Maybe later, but not right now. He accepted that. We said goodbye. I brought Noah to my parents' house once, about a month after Ryan's arrest. Not for reconciliation. Not with any plan for what would come next. I brought him because he was 13 years old, and these were his grandparents, and whatever had happened between the adults was not something he needed to be held responsible for. My mother made lunch. My father sat at the head of the table and asked Noah careful questions about school, about his interests, about the things he was building. Noah still built things, had recently started working in wood rather than cardboard, which my father found genuinely fascinating. I watched them talk. My parents were smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just in the way that people become smaller when you have seen them clearly. They were 2 people in their 60s who had made a terrible choice and compounded it for years out of cowardice and misplaced protectiveness. And they were going to live with the consequences of that in ways I was only beginning to understand. I didn't forgive them that afternoon, but I also didn't hate them. Both of those things were true simultaneously, which is the way it is with family. It doesn't resolve cleanly. It doesn't file itself into the categories you prepare for it. After lunch, Noah went out to the garden with my father, who wanted to show him something about the fence he was repairing. And I sat at the kitchen table with my mother, and the particular quiet of a room where too much has been said and not enough. She put her hands around her coffee mug. How much was it? She said. Total, Helen's report. I told her the number. She closed her eyes. I let the silence sit. Then I said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about the answer before you respond. She opened her eyes. How much was that worth? I said. In birthdays, in school plays, in Sunday calls where he said okay in the voice he learned when he stopped expecting me to come home. I kept my voice even. How much was it worth? She didn't answer. She looked at the table, and her jaw worked, and she didn't answer. I hadn't expected her to. There is no answer to that question. That's why I asked it. The thing about reclaimed time is that it doesn't feel the way you imagine. I had thought on the flight home, in the weeks of investigation, in the nights of running the math, that once the truth was out and the arrangements were changed, there would be a feeling of expansion, of space returning. I thought I would feel the weight lift. What I felt instead was quiet, a very specific kind of quiet that I hadn't experienced in a long time. The quiet of a Saturday morning when my phone didn't have anything waiting in it. The quiet of a paycheck arriving and sitting in my account without a transfer scheduled for Friday. The quiet of an evening with nothing required of me except whatever I chose to do with it. It took me several weeks to understand that this was what normal felt like. I had been carrying so long that I'd forgotten the weight. Noah and I went away for a week in December. His idea, partly. He had mentioned during one of our evenings in that he'd never been to the mountains. My parents' house was flat suburban landscape, and our video calls had not included geography. And I had a week of unused leave and no particular reason not to. We rented a cabin, small, functional, with a porch that looked at a ridge and a fireplace that worked if you were patient with it. The first evening we sat on the porch with hot chocolate and watched the light change on the ridge and didn't talk much. Noah was comfortable with silence in the way of people who have spent time with themselves. A quality I recognized, having developed it myself, though I wished he'd had the chance to develop it differently. At some point he said, I knew you were sending money. Grandma told me. She said it was for my medicine. I know she did. Did you know she was, that it wasn't all for? No, I said. I didn't know until I came home. He was quiet for a moment. I thought you were staying away because it was expensive to come back, he said. Not just the flight, all of it. Like, if you came home you'd be spending money you needed to save for me. I looked at him. So I tried not to ask, he said. When you were coming back, because I didn't want to make it harder. 13 years old, and he had been managing his own hope to reduce my costs. I set my mug down. Noah, I said, I need to tell you something. He looked at me. There was nothing you could have done or not done that would have changed how much I wanted to be home. There was no amount of asking that would have been too much. The reason I wasn't there, I stopped. Found the next words carefully. The reason I wasn't there had nothing to do with how much I loved you or how much I wanted to be with you. I was lied to, and I should have checked sooner. And I'm sorry I didn't. He looked at the ridge for a moment. Okay, he said. Different from the other okay. This one had room in it. I picked up my mug. We watched the last of the light leave the ridge, and the temperature dropped the way mountain temperatures do, suddenly, decisively. And after a while Noah said he was going in to find something to eat, and I said I'd be there in a minute. I sat alone on the porch for a few more minutes. The quiet was complete out here. No traffic, no city sounds, nothing but cold air and the occasional movement of wind through the trees below the ridge. I thought about the number on Helen's report. I thought about the birthdays. I thought about Noah in the school play, waving at a screen with both hands. And then I stopped thinking about those things. Not because they didn't matter. Because there was a 13-year-old in a cabin behind me who was probably looking for crackers and would want to know if I had any opinions about what to watch tonight. And I had opinions. And I was here. And that was not nothing. That was, in fact, the whole point. I went inside.